Do Jeremiah Grossman.
Thank you. Oh, yeah. You know, for those who are along the wall, you guys, there's plenty of seats. Hey everybody, my name is Jeremiah Grossman. I am the founder of WhiteHat Security. What that means is I am sometimes CEO, sometimes CTO, and sometimes CEO again. It depends on what the company needs, but now I just go by founder because it's sufficiently ambiguous, so I don't have to define what my job is. I get to do what I want. The company headquarters is in Santa Clara, and I'll tell you a bit more about WhiteHat later. But I get the opportunity, the privilege really, to travel around the world and share what I know about application security. And after 15 years of public speaking, I've slowed my travel down, spending more time at home with my family and doing research and things like that. And while the company's in Santa Clara, I actually come from Maui, Hawaii. So if I'm here, it's not exactly for the weather. It's because I actually really believe in what we do and the importance of web security. And hopefully you'll be able to learn a thing or two about the things that are important out there in the world. So let's just jump through. So my background, I've been doing computer security for a long, long time. I first got into computers when I was 8. I think my first programming language was Pascal. But I really started doing security full time back at Yahoo in 2000. So I've been doing this for about 15 years now. When I started doing what we now call web security, there were those two words you never found together. Web application security or web security wasn't a term that was actually used. Everybody was just racing to get on the web. But beyond all the titles, CEO, CTO, and things like that, which I don't put a whole lot of value in, I do consider myself first and foremost a hacker, and not the bastardized version like a DevOps hacker or a code hacker, things like that. No, I like to break stuff. I like to break software. I like to break PlayStations at home. It drives my kids crazy, but that's just what I do. Because I find that at the end of the day, it's the litmus test. Put all your input validation, all your prepared statements, all your firewalls, all your antivirus. Can you hack it or can you not? Hacking is a very pure, honest way of going about computer security, and I like it because there's always a new challenge. And I was also fortunate enough a couple of months ago at AppSec USA. I got a nice award from OS, so that was a nice honor. And then when I'm not doing computer security, I'm doing physical security work. I do martial arts and got myself a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. So in case I ever get in close proximity with the bad guy, I'll be okay. All right, so a little bit about WhiteHat. I'll talk to you more about it, but just in context of data. I'm going to show you a lot of data. But effectively, we're a vulnerability assessment company that's specifically focused on websites. Our job is to find the vulnerabilities in our customers' websites and help them get them fixed before the bad guys exploit them. It's a very simple concept. We've been around for a while, so we've grown to fairly sufficient size. We have a lot of top customers, but the funnest part of the job is that since we're able to do vulnerability assessments subscription style, we get the get out of jail free card now to pretty much hack whatever we want. If you want to hack 100 banks today at WhiteHat, we can. And we have the hacker army behind us. So just a little bit about that. So we're about, almost 350 employees now. But one of the things that we did, one of the challenges you run into in security is there's a very large talent shortage in the industry. So we had to staff up our threat research center, our hacker army. And it was getting increasingly difficult to do that in the US. So after an exhaustive country-by-country search, WhiteHat settled on Ireland as the place that we were going to start up our next threat research center. And 9 months ago, we chose Belfast as the city to do it, and we broke ground, so to speak. We opened up our first office, and in Belfast now employs over 50 Irish in that region. And all these guys do all day long is hack websites and learn how to hack websites, so they have a good time. All right. Now, over the course of my career, again, I like to break things, so I quite literally wrote the book on cross-site scripting, coined the name clickjacking. I've been using advertising networks to perform denial of service attacks, intranet hacking with browsers. So all the hacking stuff is really cool, it's fun, but these are the 5 areas that I spend the majority of my time on while I can continue breaking the web, and that's all well and good. These are the things where I feel that I can make the largest impact on the industry and helping us secure the web. I want to understand the threat actors are out there, who they are, where they're from, what their motivations are, what their methods are. Are they innovating in terms of what attacks they're using, or are they scaling it out across the range? Or are they doing both at the same time? I like to understand the intersection of security guarantees, and we're going to talk a lot about that today, and cyber insurance because they're kind of synonymous. It's going to be a big deal out there in the next coming years. When we do our work well, and there's going to be a lot of pen testers in the audience here. We're at IBM, right? They have the whole ethical hacking team. You have Owen that has EdgeScan, and the whole world is filled with pen testers. And all we've really done is buried our customers in vulnerabilities, and most of them are not getting fixed now or ever. So how do we go about lowering the cost of remediation, making it easier, and learning how to prioritize? Without that, there's no sense in finding any more vulnerabilities because if they're not going to get fixed, we're not going to make progress. So this is a very important issue. 4, I want to understand the software development lifecycle, software security development lifecycle. You'll hear these terms like best practices, developer training, security and QA, and all these sorts of things. But if you press anybody on it, if any of these things actually measurably work, the whole industry is stark with data. I want to know what processes that I recommend are actually going to make a meaningful difference, and I've been starting to measure this stuff. And finally, I wanted to figure out ways to address the application security labor shortage. WhiteHat figured out a long time ago that we were not going to grow our business by hiring application security people. We had to create them. We had to find a way to hire, train, and retain the best talent in the world. So the 2 areas that we're going to focus on today are, we're going to focus a little bit on the threat actors, the second one, the security guarantees, and the SDLC processes. And of course, if you guys have questions along the way, ask away. I have some Arduinos here to give you away for good questions. All right. Now, the threat actors out there in the world, they come in 4 types generally. You have the hacktivists. These guys hack for fame or to get a message out there. Names that come to mind are, say, Sony is a good example. They didn't hack them for money. They hacked them to get a message out there, fame. A lot of times what the hacktivists will do is they'll hack something and then make up a story on some political message they want to get out there, and then they'll apply that to it. These guys are the canaries in the coal mine. I don't lose much sleep over these guys. I've seen their tactics. They're not terribly good, but they are successful nonetheless. Second, these are the guys that are a little bit scarier. These are the organized crime guys. I spend most of my time defending my customers against those. These guys are purely in it for the money. These guys are going to hack you and not tell you, hack you and not laugh at you. They're purely in it for the money and the ROI, and we have to understand the difference between the hacktivists and the organized cyber criminals. Their motives and their methods are very different. Then you have the nation state. They're also not in it for the money. They're certainly not in it for the fame. They're after command and control. From those guys, if they're going to help out their home industries, think about this for a second. Why spend $1 billion or $100 million developing a new tech when you can spend $1 million on a red team and steal it for $1 million, right? That's what's going on out there every single day. And now we see inklings, little tiny inklings of terrorist activities using cyber as a means to do whatever it is that they do. There's not a lot of evidence up there, but it's a 4th one that's worth talking about and keeping our eye on. Now, who here is familiar with the Data Breach Investigations Report? Okay. Everybody's hand should have gone up. This is our industry's required reading. This is the actuarial data. If you're not familiar with this report, like really just didn't want to stick your hand in the air, no problem. But what these guys do, this is the Verizon Incident Response Team. When an incident occurs, it's like CSI for computer security. They go out there, do the forensics investigation, try to figure out who did it, how they broke in, what they are after, how long they are there, and everything about it. And they collect all this data in a giant pool, and they send out reports, large reports that tell us on an aggregate what's going on out there in the world. Now, I look at the web application world, web security. That's what I do. So if you look at it here on the IT, the information area, web security ends up being the largest method of attack. If you're an IT company, 1/3 of the time you're going to get hacked through a web application. If you're financial services like a bank, that's about 1/3 of the time. So that kind of gives you an idea, this chart here, of how the bad guys are breaking into systems. And there's hot spots all over the place. But what you can tell right away, how industries get attacked, get broken into, will vary. We can't treat every industry the same, and our methods on defense have to adjust to what the bad guys do. Otherwise, this will just keep happening. Now, if we look into the web application space, how exactly are the bad guys breaking into the web apps? What attacks are they leveraging? And here's the list, direct from Verizon. I'll just quote it verbatim, "This year, organized crime became the most frequently seen threat actor for web app attacks." So if you're going to get your web app attacked, yes, you'll have the hacktivists, but more often than not, it's going to be the cyber criminals that are going to hack you and steal from you, and that's just the way it is, whether it's your money, your data, whatever. Look at 1 and 2 there. The use of stolen credentials is big. You hack one system, you get a whole bunch of passwords, and then you leverage against other systems. That's going on big out there. SQL injection, everybody's favorite, is about 19% of hacks, and you can kind of see it going down the range. You see cross-site scripting at 6.3%, and so on and so forth. Now, for those that are familiar with OWASP and the OWASP top 10, overlay OWASP top 10 on that. This is what the bad guys do. You'll see very, very little overlap. The OWASP top 10 is all nice, well and good, but you almost have to take it with a grain of salt because the bad guys don't care about what we do on PDF reports. They care about what breaks in. These are the things that are actually useful for breaking into systems at a web application layer. Now, here's where it gets a little scary on an economic model. 2015, the global spending for InfoSec, how we all get paid, reached about $75 billion according to Gartner, growing at 5% per year. Okay? Keep that in your mind. After all the hacks, all the firewalls, all the antivirus, all these things, we've spent $75 billion globally on cybersecurity. Let that sear into your mind. And that 5% there is important to remember. For all that money, here is some WhiteHat data from our systems, and I mentioned some of our customer types. The way to read this chart is when we look at particular websites over, let's say, over 24, this is 2014 data over a given year, 70% of them had something wrong with had a vulnerability called insufficient transport layer protection. Something was screwed up in their SSL implementation. Might be a heartbleed or something like that. 56% leaked too much information. But the more ones you're probably more familiar with are cross-site scripting. So 47% of the sites we looked at in 2014 had at least one instance of cross-site scripting, likely more. But the one that is really interesting, you always want to look at the edge of the range. If you notice there's SQL injection, they didn't even crack our top 10 in terms of likelihood anymore. It only shows up on 6% of our customers' websites. That's it, just 6%. But it's one of the leading attacks that actually works out there when you look at the Verizon data. So just because prevalence is there doesn't mean the bad guys care, and that doesn't mean it's actually used. 6%, that right there, of sites is causing a massive amount of damage. So the bad guys get to choose what attacks work or what attack techniques work. Now, here's where it gets, how should I say, we have to do better. When WhiteHat finds a vulnerability, we tell our customers what website it's in, what URL, what parameter, how bad it is, what the bad guys can do with it, so on and so forth. So that way they can go and fix it, change the code, patch it, bring the site down, whatever they're going to do. It's their job to fix it, like many of you do here. If you find vulnerabilities for a living, you find it, somebody else fixes it. When they fix it, we can actually get a time to fix. The average distance between the time to fix, this is our data measured in days, organized by industry. So again, the way to read this is, when we find a vulnerability, let's say in financial services, banks, it takes them an average of 160 days to fix vulnerabilities. It's pretty crazy, huh? Now, one of the reasons for this is that you have developer time is scarce. If any company has extra developer time, please let me know who they are. You have to do a trade-off between revenue-generating features that if you don't ship, you will lose money, or do you fix a vulnerability that might get exploited and might cost you money, and the business just says, ship the feature. So this is real world. This is what's happening out there. Now, when you smash together vulnerability volume, time to fix and remediation rates, you get something called window of exposure. It's probably my favorite metric. The way to read this is that the ones in red, these are the sites that are always vulnerable. So the way to read this is that 39%, let me step back here. Just ask you guys a question real quick. How many vulnerabilities does a website need for a bad guy to break in? Thank you. This is the amount of time the average website has at least one vulnerability in a given year, the window of exposure. How often the bad guy can conceivably break into the system, compromise a user account, steal users' data, so on and so forth, the serious issues. 39% of our financial services and insurance customers had at least one serious vulnerability every single day of 2014. There was not a day they didn't have one. Got that part? Clear enough? Now, that's the bad news. The good news is there's some people out there that are actually doing a pretty good job that are vulnerable less than 30 days of the year. So in which case, 17% of the financial services guys had a serious vulnerability less than 30 days of the year. So when I want to learn what works in web security, I compare and contrast the guys in red from the guys in orange, and then we can actually start having a conversation because clearly they're not learning from each other yet, and they have something to teach us. Now let's talk about losses. Remember, we're not just finding vulnerabilities as an academic exercise. We're trying to keep somebody out of our systems, and we're trying to prevent loss. So what are the losses? This comes from the latest and greatest Verizon data breach report. The one I'll draw your eye to is the expected column there, and they organize it by records. So let's say, for the sake of argument, a company, a website, a database gets hacked that has, let's say, 1 million records, and it gets compromised. That will cost that company, on average, about $1.2 million US, and then you can see the standard deviation between them. And that's how, generally how it works. So on a broad average, the median is about $500,000 or so at 100,000 records. Pretty clear. So now we have actual real loss data. So when we start doing risk modeling, risk analysis, should we fix this, should we not? We now have numbers of vulnerabilities, and we have some loss data. We're actually starting to get data science behind this and not just finding and fixing for the sake of finding and fixing. Now, the net result, after we spend $75 billion on InfoSec, at the end of the day, every year becomes year of the hack. The hacks always get worse. In 2014, now, this is a survey of CISOs and security professionals on how they feel, how effective they can be in their enterprises at preventing getting hacked. In 2014, 71% of security professionals said their networks were breached. 3/4 of those surveyed said their companies were hacked. That's a lot. Now, 22% of them, about 1/4, said they were victimized 6 or more times. The bad guys are quite successful. But here's the one that really caught my eye. About half, 52%, said their organizations will likely be successfully hacked in the next 12 months. They are highly apathetic. They think no matter what they do, they're probably going to get hacked within the next year. Now, if that's how you feel, what's the next thing that you do if you're a business? If you're, no matter what you do, what you spend, you're still going to get hacked, what do you do?
Buy insurance.
Excellent. Actually, I'm going to give you an Arduino. So this is U.S. data. 2014, American businesses were expected to pay $2 billion in cyber insurance premiums. The way this works is you work with your insurer. If a hack happens, they pay off the hard costs. And the hard costs will be fines, legal costs, recovery, downtime, but not the soft costs like brand damage and things like that. Now, look at the speed of growth in this industry. Cybersecurity insurance is growing at about 60 to 70% per year, and it's not part of that $75 billion. That's completely separate. So what's happening is the business is finding that investing in insurance premiums, has become more attractive in investing in what we all do. That's craziness, but they're probably right.
Sir, now, do you base on successful payouts from insurance? Because
I'll throw you an Arduino next. Okay. I have a couple of samples that to do the time. There's samples, but I have many, many more. But this is the case of Target. I don't know how big the news of this was out here, but in the US it was quite large. Target spent $250 million after their breach. That's how much they budgeted for. Their insurer, their cyber insurer, paid them back $90 million. That's one example. Home Depot reported a loss at $43 million, and their cyber insurer paid them back $15 million. So the payouts are happening, and these more and more issues are going to court because sometimes the insurers don't want to pay out. Imagine that. But this is big dollars, and and the landscape out there is pretty large. And the last one I'll give you is Anthem in their hack. They had, well, not in their hack, they got hacked, but they had about $150 to $200 million in insurance coverage. And insurance providers now, at least in the US and globally now, is pretty diverse. The industry is very fragmented, it's all very different. So if you're gonna buy cyber insurance, you have to really look at the fine print. But that's what's going on out there. Hacks are happening, vulnerabilities everywhere. People don't think they can do anything about it, so they look to their local insurance provider. Now, I want you to play this scenario forward in what happens. Just like in the US, we have something called the Federal Aviation Administration. So whenever there's an airplane crash, they do their CSI kind of thing on what happened. And they start to develop policies and procedures on how to keep planes in the air. What's going to happen, I think, in the cyber insurance industry is these insurers are going to keep writing policies that are favorable to them, but when the breaches occur, they're going to start collecting actuarials, and they're going to start, it's not me. They're going to start collecting actuarials on incidents, meaning they're going to start dictating back to the business, back to us, very prescriptively. This is not going to be, this is like PCI on steroids. Did I do it? Okay. This is like going to be like PCI on steroids. They're going to tell you what firewall to buy, how to implement it, where to install it, your antivirus, or whatever the case may be. They're going to start dictating back to us, and guess what? They're going to be right because they're going to have the data. I guess while this is getting fixed, there's any questions so far? Yes, sir?
Are you going to talk about internal versus external? Because I'd say the majority are internal hacks.
So the question was the internal versus external adversary. And for a long, long time, I heard the internal ones are worse. If you go by the Verizon data, they're pretty clear on it that of all the incidents that they're brought in, which is not the whole spectrum of the world, I think it's 95% of the time, the adversary is external. Yes?
So research suggests that for the companies which provide information about the assessments or average losses per industries outside of security industry, well, the losses are not really predicted that well because of the fact that different companies submit different information. It is difficult to average this. In other words, many people doubt about the actual losses reported. So how do you assess that?
I think when you actually, again, and I have a very U.S.-centric view of the world. It's just where I grew up and what I service, is that when these companies report losses to their insurance providers, they can't lie. They have to actually document and prove that those were their losses. And also, we have laws in the U.S. that when companies get hacked, they have to report it. They can't not report it anymore. And so I think at a federal level, at least in the U.S., they're going to have to report more of it on a wider basis. I don't know if that answers your question, but let's keep going.
Well, if it's more than they are aware, then it's overblown.
It could be. It could be. What we're seeing, at least from the Security Exchange Commission, those who monitor our stock market, is when a company says they lost $100 million, they're going to have to put it in their SEC filings. They're going to have to report it. They cannot lie. They might lie about their soft costs, but not the hard costs. Let me keep going. All right. Now, I want to bring all this back together. Information security spending globally, as I mentioned, was about $75 billion. New spend this year will be about 3.8. But look at the compare and contrast. Cybersecurity insurance, just about the same amount of investment is going to go, new investment is going to go into cybersecurity insurance. That's money that's not going to us to help protect their systems. It's going to downside protection. This should really be a wake-up call to all of us, that we have a severe credibility problem in our industry when the business decides they've spent enough on us and now they're going to go get insurance. All right. Now, let's talk about us for a second because we have to be very honest with ourselves about what's going on out there. You ever notice how everything in InfoSec is sold without guarantees or warranties in contrast to every other industry that we deal with in life? There's no guarantees, no warranties, no return policies. We don't buy cars that way. We don't buy watches that way. We don't buy our clothes that way. We don't buy anything that way outside of Craigslist without a warranty. But everything, every firewall you buy, every antivirus, intrusion detection system, endpoint product, whatever, comes with no guarantee. You buy this product, it's supposed to make you secure, it does it, and the vendor goes, sucks to be you. That's terrible, right? Our interests are not in line with our own customers. This cannot continue. If we want our credibility back, We actually have a way if we only want to take it. I say no more snake oil. Now, over the last 10 years, there might have been a good reason for this. There might have been a good reason for security companies not to guarantee the work that they do. When they say, this is going to protect you from this hack, we didn't have telemetry data on the performance of our products. Here's your firewall, good luck to you. We didn't know how well it worked. Here's your antivirus, good luck to you. We didn't know how it worked. But in the age of cloud, and you hear every security service provider claims to be cloud, we have data. We know what we're able to find. We know what we're able to fix. We know what the bad guys are doing. We have the telemetry data. We have no more excuses as an industry not to do security guarantees. We can actually do this now. When a vulnerability assessment provider, and WhiteHat is included, says, we're going to find the issues, and the whole idea is, we're going to find the issues the bad guys exploit. If you fix them, you will not get hacked. This should be guaranteeable with an acceptable amount of losses. Again, like Sony, when you buy a TV, they know 1 out of X amount is probably going to be defective, and they'll ship you another one. They built that into their model. As a security industry, we should be doing this. And furthermore, we should be doing this and working with insurance providers on this stuff so they know what products and services we sold to the customers and what worked and what doesn't work. I think in the next 3 to 5 years, there's going to be a giant shakeout. There's going to be the security vendors who know how well their products work, and they're the other ones that are just guessing or lying, and it's snake oil. And there's not going to be anybody left in the middle. So I've been encouraging my customers and the entire industry to start getting on board with this stuff, because if you're not able to do security guarantees, I'm going to start going, it's either you don't know if your product works, or it doesn't work and you know it. And I don't see any other way around this stuff. So one of the things, and I'm going to shade on a very thin line here, but you can ask me questions about it at the end if you really want to know. WhiteHat is now able to has been offering guarantees to our customers over the last year. If they get hacked on a vuln we missed, meaning we screwed up, we will give them all their money back for their service, and we'll cover the first $500,000 on their breach costs. We'll go first. We're the first ones to ever do this, and we're very serious about this. Now, a lot of times people think this concept is crazy, security guarantees for security products. But look at this. I just did a quick search for security guarantee. You can do it on Google just like I did. And that concept comes up in every financial service provider out there. If your account gets hacked on Scottrade, eBay, E-Trade, PayPal, they will make you whole. They are the ones that are buying our security services and products, the ones that we don't guarantee, but collectively, they're going to guarantee their security to their customers. So this concept is not new. It is not novel. It is happening out there, just outside of our industry. We're not taking advantage. Now, before we get into the whole software security side, how much time have I got burned through?
7 more minutes.
7 more minutes. Oh, okay. I like this quote. The only 2 products not covered by product liability are religion and software shall not escape much longer. I find this to be very, very true. Now, I'm going to just read this one slide, and I'll jump to the next, an ending slide, but all the slides will be available to you. One of the things we did at WhiteHat is we know on a large basis, again, about 1,000 companies, about 30,000 websites over 10 years, who's vulnerable to what types of web application issues for how long. We know this stuff. We have the best outcome data available in terms of vulns. After you've done your input validation, you've trained your developers, you've done the QA testing, you put up your web application firewalls, we know the vulns. What we don't know from the software development lifecycle is what these companies did to achieve their outcomes, good, bad, or otherwise. We don't know if they trained, if they did, how often. We don't know if they did QA. We don't really know if they have web application firewalls. But if we can marry these 2 things, if we can start learning what our customers or what these companies do and regress it against vulnerability data, we actually start learning some really fascinating stuff. So what we did was we created this 16-question survey and sent it to all of our customers. We got back 118 responses, and we just asked them questions. Do you do developer training? If so, how often do you do it? Do you do adversarial QA testing? If so, how often do you do it? Things like that. And then we regressed against their vuln data. And I'll give you, we also answered questions like this, and I'll just give you one quick run, and I'll jump to the end. It's really fascinating data. One of the things we asked is, if an organization experiences a website breach, web application data breach, which part of the organization is held accountable? The way to read this is 9% of the respondents said that the board of directors would be accountable in the event of a web application breach. A quarter of them, or maybe a third of them, said executive management. But look at us here. About a third of the company said that we, the security team, would be responsible for a breach, but only a third. Now, here's where it gets pretty fascinating. When we group this together and regress it, how does who is accountable affect their metrics? The way to read this is, of those who said their board of directors was responsible in the event of a website breach, that's the average number of vulns. They had 10 vulns when the board of directors said. When the security department said that they were accountable, 25 vulnerabilities appeared. Now, there's two ways to look at this. One might think that those who are made the board of directors accountable, they had less vulns. That might be one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is when you made the security department accountable, they're just going to find more vulns. It's another way to look at it. So we have to be very careful of deriving meaning, but these are statements of white hat fact, and we're not sure what messages to be learned from this, but we can start putting the data out there. I like the remediation rates one. When you make the board of directors accountable for a website breach, the remediation rates were about 44%. When you make the software development accountable, it's about a third. So you can kind of see how these things work out. Now, given I don't have much time, we can start going, oh yeah, I want to cover this one real quick. When we report a vulnerability to companies, we want to know why they fix issues. What is the main driver? Is it compliance, policy, risk reduction, customer demand, or whatever? Last year, when we did this study, the number one reason companies fixed issues was compliance. The auditors said so. This year, it changed. I think it changed to risk reduction as the number one driver is because everybody got PCI compliant and the hacks didn't stop. Imagine that. Risk reduction is now the leading driver. Great. And then we can do the regression analysis there. But I'm going to jump through. What we found is we started stacking all these controls together and try to figure out what security control improved what metric. And what we found that application security has no best practices. If you're thinking developer training is going to help you, it might or it might not. I'll give you some examples first. How am I doing on time? 5 minutes? 5? I get 2 answers. Okay. Either way, let's say Site A has a mountain of vulnerabilities. But when they're found, they're fixed fast and they're fixed often. Okay? Now, since they're fixed fast and they're fixed often, it's hard to say that that's a training issue, that the developers don't know how to fix these issues. Otherwise, they wouldn't have gotten fixed so fast. So it's not a training issue. It's something else. It might be something in the QA process or a configuration setting that says they turned off the .NET validators in QA in production for some reason, and they quickly turned it back on. Maybe it's something like that. But let's say we go to Site B. The vulnerability volume is very, very low, but every time we report vulnerabilities, it takes a long time for them to fix, or they don't get fixed at all, okay? Now, no amount of developer training in that environment, or no amount of QA testing, I should say, let's stick with QA testing, is going to reduce 5 vulnerabilities per year down to like 1 or 0. It's diminishing returns there. Now, you got to ask yourself, why aren't the developers fixing it faster? Could be 2 reasons. 1, they don't know how. Then you have to teach them. Or 2, management priority. They want revenue-generating features, and they're not allocating the dev time to actually fix vulnerabilities. So you have these 2 different data sets, right? So we have to, it's very easy to see that certain software security activities will impact different metrics in different ways. So I started to try to figure out what these are, and I'll just give you, 4 of them. So, you hear a lot of talk about static analysis, which is great. It seems to have a benefit impact on number of vulns and time to fix, but it has no direct benefit on remediation rates. QA, if you ask QA to perform basic adversarial tests, it helps the vuln volume and the remediation rate, but it has almost no impact on time to fix, and you can read the rest of the chart. So it seems very clear to me that if you're going to do software security in your enterprise, it's very important to know your metrics. I'll suggest these, and then pick the software security activity that is most likely going to affect the metric you want to improve upon. Then we can start getting very strategic and very practical about how we invest our dollars in the business, because the worst thing that what the business doesn't want to hear is just go train all your developers and things will be great. That doesn't do them any good and certainly doesn't do us any good. I'll take questions in a minute, but to close up, one of the things, and the reason I've been doing this so long, and it would be easy enough for me to retire in Maui and do my thing, but I work in web security. There's not a single person in this room that won't be on the web today. In fact, I'd hazard a guess that you don't even know a single person in this room that won't be on the web today. The web will connect roughly 2 billion people online. It's where we shop. It's where we find our way here. It's where we bank. It's where we buy things. It's where we learn things. It's where we share our most intimate secrets, really. And I think the web is probably the single greatest invention we'll see in our lifetime. And it's really a privilege for us to play a small part in protecting something that important. And that's why I continue working on these things. And I hope you will join me in helping make a more secure web. Thank you.
Sorry, Jeremiah. You're hanging around for a while, are you?
What's that?
You're hanging around for the rest of the day.
Yeah. And I have 2 Arduinos to give away, so 2 good questions.
We'll take 2 quick questions then.
Yes, sir.
One of your slides earlier mentioned nation-state attacks.
Yeah.
I was just wondering, do you have any thoughts on the implications of the normalization of these kinds of attacks?
Normalization of nation-state attacks? I don't understand.
Well, what I mean by that is, take for example the BBC website, they cover fairly frequently cyber attacks between China and the States and whatnot. And then if you look at something like the Stuxnet virus, assuming you believe that the nuclear plant it was in was a civilian plant,
Yeah.
what you're basically looking at then, what you're basically looking at then is an attack, if you believe that it's a civilian plant, on part of a country's infrastructure. And so suddenly you move from the kind of attack which could, let's just say you shut down a hospital, for example, and it was also in the news the other day that Médecins Sans Frontières are looking to bring war crimes, a war crimes tribunal regarding the bombing of a hospital. And I'm just wondering, how much of a difference do you see between these 2 types of attack?
I think from what I've seen, and I'm not the foremost authority on the differences between nation-state and organized cybercrime when it comes to web, but from what I've seen so far, it seems that the techniques that they're using are very similar. They like PHP RCE stuff, or PHI stuff, and they like SQL injection a lot. But I think what the main difference is their target selection. The bad guys are in it for the data and the money. Nation state is likely like command and control over energy grids and things like that, dams and wastewater systems and things like that. So I think target selection is a little bit different, and and I also think attack duration matters a lot. I think the longest I've seen the hacktivists go after a system is about 4 to 5 days. Organized crime, maybe a week or 2. The nation state guys, they'll do it 9 to 5 forever till they break in. So I think those are probably the biggest differences. Can we send the Arduino back there?
Jeremiah, we're probably going to have to leave it there.
I'm sorry?
We're probably going to have to leave it there if that's okay. I'll send it back to him. But if anybody wants to go to Jeremiah and ask him a question, I'm sure he'd oblige for the last Arduino.
Thank you very much, everybody. I appreciate it.
Thanks, guys.